Welcome to HFY Vanguard, the chronicles of a species too stubborn to lose. And this chapter starts now. Jack Harmon wiped his brow with the back of a grease-stained hand, leaving behind a streak of dark oil that cut across his forehead like a battle scar. The little garage he had converted into a workshop was sweltering in the mid-afternoon heat, despite three industrial fans humming tirelessly at full blast. Each one rattled as though ready to shake itself apart, but they managed just enough airflow to keep Jack from passing out in the oppressive air. The place smelled of ozone engine coolant and scorched metal, a smell Jack no longer noticed unless he stepped outside and returned. To him, it was the scent of survival. 5 years had passed since he left Earth's military, and in those years he had traded barracks and battlefields for benches stacked with tools, heaps of alien scrap, and the occasional spark shower that erupted when a coupling resisted his stubborn hands. Out here on a border world where dozens of alien species mingled uneasily with a minority of human settlers, Jack had carved out a reputation. He wasn't just a mechanic. He was the mechanic, the human who could make the impossible work, who could take alien tech not meant for five-fingered hands and bend it into something functional. Today, like so many days before he was hunched over a Praxian communication unit, cursing the Praxian penchant for designing power couplings deep inside crevices no human fingers could ever comfortably reach. Damn Praxian tech, he muttered, his voice muffled through clenched teeth. Always making things with 6 fingers in mind. His heavy work gloves squeaked as he adjusted the angle of a microspanner, twisting until the stubborn coupling finally clicked into place. It was in this moment of concentration that he heard it again, the faintest sound of shuffling at the doorway. Jack glanced up, and there she was, the little alien girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 in human years, her body small and slight, barely reaching his waist. Her skin was a soft shade of lilac, like the first bloom of spring violets, and her hair tumbled down in silken lavender waves. Twin-pointed ears peeked through the strands, twitching gently as if reacting to unseen sounds. But it was her eyes, wide, luminous, curious, that caught him every time. They seemed to drink in the world with bottomless wonder. Jack softened immediately. "Hey there, little one," he said, setting down his tool. His deep voice, usually gravelly with exhaustion, dropped into something almost gentle. "Come to watch the human wrestle with alien junk again?" The girl gave a small, silent nod. She rarely spoke, at least not to him, though her eyes sparkled as if words were unnecessary. She stepped lightly into the garage, her silver tunic shimmering as it caught the thin beams of sunlight slanting through the dusty window. Without being asked, she scampered over to the small wooden stool in the corner. Her stool now. Jack had placed it there after her second visit, when it became clear she wasn't just wandering in by accident. She perched gracefully, folding her hands neatly in her lap. Jack marveled again at how she seemed so at ease in this chaotic mess of a workshop filled with sharp tools, unstable prototypes, and humming power cells. Most of the locals gave him a wide berth, some out of respect, others out of suspicion. Humans were still a rare sight on this world, and while most tolerated him, few made the effort to bridge the unspoken distance between species. But this girl, she came back day after day to sit in silence and watch him work. Jack couldn't help but indulge her. He picked up a twisted piece of metal from his bench. "Want to see something cool?" he asked with a conspiratorial smile. Her ears twitched and her eyes widened in anticipation. Jack pressed a hidden latch, and the lump unfolded into a perfect geometric sphere, glowing faintly with blue light. "It's a Tandorian puzzle box," he explained. "They use them to teach their kids spatial reasoning. Took me an hour just to figure out how to unlock it the first time." The girl leaned forward eagerly, her small hands reaching out before pausing midair, as if remembering his earlier warnings. Jack chuckled. "This one's safe," he assured her, placing the puzzle box gently into her palms. She turned it carefully, the soft glow illuminating her delicate features. Jack found himself watching her more than the device, a warmth settling into his chest. He wasn't used to company. He wasn't used to anyone, let alone a child, being curious about him instead of wary. Somehow her quiet presence filled the silence in ways words never could. As he resumed work on the communicator, Jack began narrating what he was doing, half to teach, half to fill the air with something other than the buzz of tools. See, the trick with these Praxian units is that they're designed for 6 fingers. But if you bypass this circuit here and reroute through the secondary node, you can make it work with 5. The girl nodded solemnly as if she truly understood every word. Jack smiled despite himself. Hours passed like this. Jack repaired the communicator, then moved on to modifying a hover scooter for a client whose anatomy made the human-style controls unusable. At one point, he asked for the plasma cutter, pointing to a tool near her stool. She hopped down, picked it up with care, and handed it to him with such seriousness that Jack couldn't resist grinning. "Thanks, assistant," he teased, winking. Her lips curved into the smallest smile the first he had seen on her. For Jack, it was worth more than payment in credits. As the sun sank, painting long shadows across the garage, she slipped off her stool and padded to the doorway. "Same time tomorrow," he asked, only half joking. She nodded, her hair catching the light like threads of silver fire before she vanished around the corner. Jack leaned back, stretching until his spine popped. He didn't question why a child from an upscale alien district would spend her afternoons in the dingy garage of a human mechanic. He didn't question why she came alone or why she stayed for hours when she could have been with her own kind. Different species had different customs, he reasoned. Who was he to judge? But when 3 days passed with no sign of her, something inside him twisted. He found himself glancing at the doorway, more often expecting that small figure to appear. By the 4th day, worry gnawed at him. "She's probably just busy," he muttered, trying to dismiss the unease as he closed up shop. Or her family took her on a trip. Yet deep down, Jack knew better. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts. By the 5th day, the knot in his stomach had hardened into resolve. He cleaned himself up as best he could, swapping grease-stained coveralls for a navy shirt stretched tight across his shoulders and a pair of trousers that were at least free of oil smears. It wasn't much, but he wasn't going into the Nalarian Quarter looking like a beggar. The Nalarian Quarter was nothing like the industrial blocks Jack called home. Its elegant buildings rose like living sculptures, surfaces shimmering in iridescent hues that shifted with the light. Curved architecture caught the setting sun and refracted it into dazzling prismatic patterns across polished stone walkways. Even the air smelled different, cleaner, tinged with floral sweetness from the glowing gardens that lined the streets. Jack felt like a trespasser the moment he stepped inside. His heavy boots thudded against the pristine paths, echoing too loudly in the otherwise hushed quarter. The graceful Nalarian residents glided past their lilac skin and flowing garments, marking them as distinctly alien compared to Jack's tanned, rough-hewn frame. Eyes followed him, some curious, others suspicious, most faintly disapproving. He ignored them as best he could. He was here for one reason. "Excuse me," Jack said, approaching a Nalarian gardener tending to bioluminescent plants. He held his hand at waist height. "I'm looking for a little girl about this tall. Purple hair. She visits my workshop sometimes." The gardener straightened, studying him with a gaze unreadable to human eyes. "Why would a human seek a Nalarian child?" the man asked, voice lilting musically. "She's been coming by for months," Jack explained quickly, keeping his tone respectful. "She hasn't been back in nearly a week. I'm worried." The Nalarian's ears twitched, a sign of discomfort Jack had learned. Finally, the gardener said, "Many families live here. I cannot help you." Jack thanked him anyway, though frustration burned inside. He pressed on, asking others. Each encounter ended the same way: polite dismissal, suspicion, or outright coldness. As the sun set and shadows deepened between the grand structures, Jack felt defeat weighing heavily on his shoulders. That's when he overheard them. 2 Nalarian women walking ahead, voices hushed but clear enough. "Poor little Leary," one said. "Such a tragedy for one so young." Jack froze. "Leary? The House of Talon has suffered much already," the other replied. "First Lord Talon's son in the border dispute, and now his granddaughter's accident." Jack's pulse spiked. He edged closer, feigning disinterest, but every nerve in his body was tuned to their words. "She was playing near the old conduits," the first continued. "A surge damaged her optical nerves. The healers say it's permanent." Jack's breath caught. His little visitor. Blind. The thought of those luminous eyes darkened forever made his chest ache. He stepped forward, throat tight. "Pardon me," he said, forcing his voice calm. "Did you say Larry? Does she sometimes wander into the commercial district?" The women turned, their expressions hardening at the sight of a human. "Why would a human involve himself in the affairs of House Talon?" one asked coolly. "She's my friend," Jack said simply. "She's been visiting me for months. I just need to know if she's all right." They studied him with unreadable eyes. Finally, the taller one said, "You are the mechanic, the one who fixes impossible things. Leary has spoken of you." Jack blinked in surprise. She had talked about him. "She lives," the woman admitted, "but her sight is gone. For an Alarian, it is devastating. Our kind relies on vision for nearly everything. Without it, she is cut off from much of our learning and our culture." Jack swallowed hard, his mind already spinning. He barely heard the rest of their words. All he could see was Leary stumbling in darkness. All he could feel was the determination rising inside him like a storm. By the time he returned to his workshop, the decision was already made. He wasn't going to let her live in darkness. Not if he could help it. "Hang in there, little one," he whispered as he spread salvage parts across his bench and fired up his console. "Jack's going to fix this." The next morning, Jack's workshop felt emptier than usual. Tools clattered too loudly, the hum of the fans grated against his ears, and even the smell of burnt circuitry seemed harsher. He tried to throw himself into work, tinkering with a broken grav scooter, but his mind wasn't on it. Every few minutes, he found himself glancing toward the doorway, half expecting to see a small figure in a silver tunic settle quietly onto her stool. But the doorway remained empty. By noon, he couldn't take it anymore. He powered down the equipment, tugged off his gloves, and marched toward the Nilarian quarter again. He wasn't a man who gave up easily, not in war, and certainly not when it came to someone he cared about. The elegant streets greeted him with the same quiet disdain as before. Lilac-skinned residents glided past, their eyes sliding over him like he was a blemish on the pristine surface of their world. Jack pushed through it, jaw clenched, until he reached the estate district. He tried again with questions: gardener, merchant, passerby. The results were the same: dismissal, suspicion, thinly veiled hostility. But Jack was stubborn, and stubbornness had kept him alive through worse. Finally, when the sun dipped low, he overheard another pair of voices drifting from an arched walkway. Two Nilarian women were speaking in hushed tones, but Jack caught enough to understand. "Such a shame losing her sight so young," one said. "The House of Talon cannot endure so much sorrow." Jack froze. His gut clenched as the words replayed in his mind. Losing her sight. He stepped closer, his boots scraping against the polished stone. The women turned, ears twitching in irritation. "Pardon me," Jack said, his tone strained but polite. "You're speaking of a girl, Leary." Their gazes sharpened, clearly offended at his intrusion. "Why would a human concern himself with House Talon's affairs?" one asked. "Because she's my friend," Jack answered without hesitation. His voice was firm, unshaken. "She came to my workshop almost every day for months. I just need to know what happened." There was a tense silence. Then at last one of them relented. "She lives," the taller woman admitted, though her tone was cool. "But she has lost her sight. The accident was catastrophic." Jack swallowed hard, feeling his throat tighten. He pictured Leary's wide eyes, always so full of wonder, now clouded and empty. A heavy ache settled in his chest. "She spoke of you," the other woman said, studying him more closely. "The human who makes broken things work again. She said you told her stories while you worked." Jack nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "Then you understand," the taller one continued. "For a Nilarian, blindness is not only a physical limitation, it is a cultural severance. We rely on vision to learn to connect, to live within our traditions. Without it, she will be alone even among us." The words struck Jack like a hammer. He thought of the way Larry had leaned forward to watch him work, the way her small fingers had turned the glowing puzzle box. He imagined her cut off from that joy, lost in an eternal void. No, he couldn't accept that. He thanked the women stiffly and turned on his heel, striding back to his workshop with a single thought burning in his mind. If their physicians couldn't help her, then he would. That night, Jack cleared his workbench, completely sweeping aside half-finished projects and scattering components across the floor. He dug through crates of salvaged tech, pulling out anything that might help. Neural conduits, sensory transceivers, cracked HUD lenses, outdated biointerfaces, all of it went onto the pile. He powered up his old tablet and began sketching. His hand moved quickly, sketching circuits and diagrams with a precision that came from years of field improvisation. He didn't know exactly how Nalarian neural systems worked, but he knew enough. He had tinkered with augmentation tech before crude prototypes meant for human soldiers. If he could bypass her optical nerves entirely, he might be able to feed other sensory data directly into her brain. Heat signatures, sonic reflections, electromagnetic fields. All of it could be translated into patterns the brain could learn to interpret as spatial awareness. It wouldn't be true vision, not as Nalarian healers defined it, but it would give her something: freedom, independence, a way to live without stumbling in darkness. "Hang in there, little one," Jack murmured to the empty room. "I'll give you your world back." The following days blurred together. Jack worked until his hands shook, stopping only long enough to gulp down caffeine and collapse for brief naps at his bench. He called in favor with clients and scavengers trading repair jobs for specialized components he couldn't fabricate himself. An old contact smuggled him a fragment of a retired military visor, which he gutted for its neural relay system. The prototype began to take shape. He forged a lightweight frame from flexible alloy, ensuring it would adjust as Leary grew. He embedded arrays of microsensors along the band, each designed to pick up different environmental data. Heat sensors for thermal awareness, sonic detectors to read echoes and map surroundings, electromagnetic filters to sense fields invisible to the naked eye. Then came the hardest part: designing the neural interface. He spent hours poring over Nalarian medical texts, piecing together fragments of knowledge from old repair manuals and translated research papers. His military training had taught him how to improvise under pressure, but this was different. This wasn't about fixing a machine. This was about giving a child her life back. Every failure cut deep. One night, the prototype fried itself in a burst of sparks, scorching his forearm. Jack barely winced, too busy snarling at the smoking ruin of his work. Another time, the neural relay overloaded, sending a feedback surge that would have knocked Leary unconscious had she been wearing it. He ripped it apart with trembling hands, starting over from scratch. But each failure taught him something new. Each mistake brought him closer to success. By the third sleepless night, his workshop was littered with broken circuits and empty caffeine packs. His reflection in the dark window looked haunted eyes, bloodshot stubble, grown wild shoulders hunched with exhaustion. But the visor in his hands gleamed with promise. It was sleek, smooth shaped to fit comfortably over a child's face. The sensors pulsed faintly as he powered them on each one, feeding data into the compact neural translator at the back. The signals merged into patterns that his tablet displayed as shifting shapes, primitive but coherent. It wasn't perfect. The resolution was crude. The brain would need time to adapt to make sense of the strange input. But it worked. It was enough. Jack slumped back in his chair, staring at the visor as if it were a miracle. For a moment, he allowed himself a tired smile. "Got you, kiddo," he whispered hoarsely. "Your world's not gone yet." He didn't know how he'd get it to her. House Talon would never let a human mechanic stroll into their estate uninvited. And even if he somehow convinced them to try, they might reject the device outright as dangerous or untested. But none of that mattered in the moment. Jack had done what everyone else said was impossible. He had built a bridge out of the dark. As he powered the visor down and set it carefully on the bench, exhaustion finally overtook him. He closed his eyes, the hum of the fans fading into the background. And for the first time in days, Jack allowed himself to hope. The sun was barely cresting over the settlement when Jack's workshop sensor chimed a soft melodic ping that cut through the fog of his exhaustion. He had fallen asleep, slumped against his workbench cheek, or pressed to his tablet, the half-finished schematics glowing faintly beneath him. His eyes burned as he rubbed them, blinking against the harsh morning light streaming through the dusty windows. Someone was at the door. Jack groaned, pushing himself upright. He expected a client, maybe the Dralaxian farmer whose atmospheric regulator he'd promised to look at. But when the door slid open, his breath caught in his throat. It was her. Leary stood just inside the threshold, her tiny hands curled at her sides. Her lavender hair hung limp, her tunic wrinkled from restless nights. But what broke Jack's heart were her eyes, once luminous with curiosity, now clouded and unfocused. They stared past him unseeing, though her head tilted slightly toward the sound of his footsteps. Beside her loomed a tall Nalarian male, his posture rigid, his robes immaculate. His stern features radiated authority, and the crest embroidered on his chest marked him unmistakably as a steward of noble lineage. His hand rested firmly on Lurie's shoulder, protective and possessive at once. Jack swallowed hard. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, kneeling down so his face was level with hers. His voice cracked despite his efforts to steady it. "I've missed you." For the first time since he'd known her, Lurie spoke. Her voice was fragile, uncertain, but it pierced Jack to his core. "Jack." "Yeah," he murmured, his throat tightening. "It's me, right here." Her small hand reached out tentatively, grasping at the air. Jack guided it gently into his own, and she clung to him, as if anchoring herself against the darkness that had swallowed her world. The steward cleared his throat, his voice musical but devoid of warmth. "You are the human mechanic," he stated rather than asked. "I am," Jack said, not taking his eyes off Lurie. "I am Von Stewart of House Talon. The child insisted on returning here. She has spoken of nothing else since the accident." Von's expression remained unreadable, but his tone carried faint disapproval, as though Lurie's attachment to Jack was an inconvenience to the household. Jack nodded, still holding the girl's hand. "I heard what happened," he said softly. "I'm sorry." Von inclined his head stiffly. "Your sympathy is noted. However, you must understand that this visit is against the wishes of Lord Talon himself. The child was persistent." Jack almost laughed at that despite the heaviness in his chest. "Stubborn, huh? Good for you, kiddo." Lurie managed a faint smile, though her clouded eyes remained fixed on nothing. Jack squeezed her hand. "I've been working on something for you," he said gently. "Something special. Do you want to see it?" Her lips parted. "See," she whispered, as if the word itself were foreign to her now. Jack forced a reassuring smile. Not like before, but maybe close enough. Von stepped forward sharply. "What is this device?" His tone, hardened suspicion flickering across his features. "Our physicians have already determined her condition is irreversible." Jack rose, retrieving the visor from his bench with careful hands. The device gleamed faintly in the workshop light, its sleek contours shaped to fit Lurie's delicate features. "I'm not repairing her eyes," Jack explained. "This bypasses them entirely. It takes in other signals, heat, sound, electromagnetic fields, and translates them into patterns her brain can process. It's experimental, but it might help." Von's expression shifted subtly, suspicion giving way to curiosity. "Such technology exists." "Not exactly," Jack admitted. "I cobbled it together from scraps in theory. It's a prototype." He looked back at Lurie. "But I built it for her because she deserves more than darkness." For a long moment, silence filled the workshop. Then Von gave a curt nod. "Proceed, but I will monitor closely." Jack knelt before Lurie, heart pounding, as he gently lifted the visor and placed it over her eyes. The band adjusted automatically, conforming to her small head. He adjusted the sensors, then slotted a power cell into the back. "Okay, little one," he said, voice trembling. "I'm going to turn it on now. It might feel strange at first, just patterns and shadows. But your brain will figure it out over time. Ready?" Her small hands gripped his forearms tightly. "Ready." Jack activated the device. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Lurie gasped. Her fingers dug into his sleeves as her head jerked slightly. I can see something," she whispered, wonder flooding her voice. "Not like before, but light shadows, shapes." She turned slowly, tilting her head. "That's your big table with all the tools," she said, pointing with startling accuracy. Jack's throat constricted. "That's right. What about me?" She reached out her hand, finding his face with uncanny precision. Her smile blossomed radiant despite her clouded eyes. "You're warm, warmer than everything else, and you make a shape, like a person, bigger than Von." Jack laughed, blinking back moisture. "That's me, all right." She took a tentative step forward, then another, navigating around a toolbox without stumbling. I can walk by myself again, she said, voice trembling with joy. Vaughn's eyes widened, amazement breaking through his stoic mask. Remarkable, he murmured. Our physicians declared it impossible. Your physicians were thinking like Nalarian physicians, Jack replied. Not unkindly. Sometimes it takes an outsider to see things differently. Vaughn regarded him for a long moment, then inclined his head slowly. House Talon is in your debt, human. Unexpected but undeniable. Jack shook his head, smiling at Leary as she explored the workshop with new confidence. I didn't do it for House Talon, he said softly. I did it for her. 4 days later, Jack was elbow deep in the guts of an atmospheric regulator when the door slid open again. This time it wasn't Leary. 4 soldiers stepped inside their iridescent armor, gleaming with shifting colors. Each carried a ceremonial staff that Jack knew could transform into a deadly weapon with a thought. Their movements were precise, disciplined elite guards of a noble house. The lead soldier's voice rang with authority. Jack Harmon, your presence is required at the House of Talon. Jack froze, his stomach sinking. He set down his tools, slowly wiping his hands on a rag. Is this about Leary? Is she okay? The soldiers exchanged glances, but their faces remained hidden behind semi-transparent visors. The child is well, the leader said curtly. Beyond that, we are not authorized to discuss. You will come with us, now. It wasn't a request. Jack's mind raced. He had heard the stories humans summoned by Nalarian nobility rarely returned. Had he violated some taboo by giving Leary the visor? Had he overstepped in ways he couldn't even imagine? He forced a smile. At least let me wash up. Can't show up at a noble house covered in grease, Kenna. The lead guard hesitated, then inclined his head slightly. 5 minutes. Jack retreated to the back room, splashing water on his face and scrubbing the worst of the grime from his arms. He changed into his cleanest shirt, a dark blue one with only a few stains. His eyes lingered on the small pulse pistol hidden under the bench, but he dismissed the thought. Against 4 elite guards, it was useless. When he emerged, the soldiers formed a square around him, front, back, both sides. They marched him through the settlement, their gleaming armor drawing stares from every passerby. Jack felt heat rise to his cheeks. It was like being paraded in shackles. They led him into the Nalarian quarter through boulevards that glittered with light. And then he saw it, the Talon Estate, a vast structure of gleaming white stone and translucent crystal, refracting the sun into dazzling cascades. Gardens of alien flora swayed as though alive, and fountains of liquid light spiraled impossibly into the air. Jack had never seen anything so beautiful, nor had he ever been so certain that he might not leave alive. Inside, the grandeur was overwhelming. The atrium stretched high above, filled with floating orbs of light and streams of water that defied gravity. The air was perfumed with spices and honey-sweet scents. Jack stood awkwardly in the center, surrounded by silent guards who took positions at each corner. Minutes stretched, each one heavier than the last, until a side door opened. An elderly Nalarian male entered, his skin a deep indigo, his silver hair styled in elaborate braids. His robe shimmered with embedded patterns of light, each motion radiating authority. Jack's pulse thundered. This was him, Lord Talon. The elder's gaze was sharp as he circled Jack slowly like a predator, assessing its prey. So he said at last, his voice low and resonant, "You are the human who gave sight to my granddaughter." Jack forced himself to stand tall, even as his mouth went dry. Lord Talon, I presume. I'm Jack Harmon, and I didn't exactly give her sight. I just gave her a way to navigate without it. Lord Talon's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile, a distinction without difference. To a child who believed her world forever darkened, you returned the light. He paused, eyes narrowing. Do you know the penalty for interfering in noble affairs without permission? Jack's stomach dropped. No, sir, Death Talon said simply. Or worse. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs, but he stood straighter, defiance burning in his chest. With all due respect, Lord Talon, I'd do it again, because that little girl deserves a chance, politics or no politics. Silence fell heavy across the atrium. The guards shifted hands, tightening on their weapons. Then, to Jack's astonishment, Lord Talon's severe expression cracked into something almost amused. Remarkable, he said softly. You humans never cease to surprise me. The silence in the atrium stretched on thick and suffocating. Jack stood rigid, refusing to flinch under the piercing gaze of Lord Talon. The old noble circled him once more, his robe shimmering with embedded light patterns that seemed to shift with each deliberate step. The guards poised at every corner, clutched their ceremonial staffs a little tighter, the hum of potential energy audible in the tense quiet. "You speak with conviction," Lord Talon said at last. "Boldness is a human trait, I am told. Boldness and recklessness." His tone was unreadable, neither approval nor condemnation, merely weighing judging. Jack forced himself to meet the elder's eyes. "Where I come from, we call it doing what's right." One of the guards twitched, clearly offended at the informality of his words. Lord Talon raised a hand, silencing them. "And what if what you call right threatens the order of our society? What if your actions, however well-meaning, destabilize what has endured for generations?" Jack swallowed, but his voice stayed firm. "Then maybe your society needed to be shaken." The words left his mouth before he could stop them. For a heartbeat, he thought he had doomed himself. The guards stepped forward in unison, staffs buzzing as they primed their weapons. Jack straightened, deciding that if he was going to die, he'd do it standing. And then a small voice cut through the tension. "Grandfather, stop scaring him." Jack turned, his heart lurching. Leary had slipped into the atrium unnoticed, her small form moving with confidence under the guidance of the visor he had built. The device now gleamed with delicate silver filigree, as if House Talon had already altered it to match their aesthetic. She navigated around the guards easily, stopping directly in front of Jack before wrapping her arms around his waist. The guards froze, stunned. Even Lord Talon blinked in surprise. Jack instinctively placed a hand on her shoulder. "Easy, kiddo," he murmured. Leary looked up at the old patriarch, her clouded eyes steady despite the faint shimmer of the visor's sensors. "You said we were going to thank him, not test him." A long pause followed. Then, to Jack's astonishment, the corners of Lord Talon's mouth curved upward in a faint smile. "Indeed, little one. I merely wish to know the measure of this human." He turned to the guards. "Stand down." The staffs lowered. The tension that had threatened to snap dissipated. Jack exhaled slowly, his muscles trembling with the release. Lord Talon studied him anew. "You defied our laws. You interfered where no outsider should have. Yet," he gestured at Leary, who clung to Jack's side with quiet determination, "the results speak for themselves. For this House Talon owes you a debt. By ancient right, I name you Talon Ven, friend of the house, with all privileges and protections therein." Gasps rippled through the guards. Even Jack knew enough to realize how unprecedented this was. No human had ever been granted such status. Before he could respond, another voice entered the hall. "Then it is settled." Jack turned, and for a moment the world seemed to slow. She stood framed in the arched doorway, tall, graceful, and radiant. Her gown was the color of midnight sky, shimmering as though woven from starlight itself. Her violet hair cascaded down her back in silken waves, catching the glow of the floating lights. Her eyes, large and luminous, held a complexity that stole Jack's breath, strength and sorrow intertwined with something softer, something dangerously close to curiosity. Lady Atara, Lord Talon intoned his tone, shifting to one of respect. "You arrive at an opportune moment." Jack realized with a jolt who she must be: Leary's mother, the widow of Talon's fallen son. Atara stepped forward, her movements fluid, every line of her body exuding authority and elegance. Yet her gaze remained fixed on Jack. Not with disdain, not with suspicion, but with an intensity that unsettled him in ways he hadn't expected. "You are Jack Harmon," she said, her voice melodic, carrying both warmth and command. "Yes, ma'am," Jack replied, straightening instinctively. "Just a mechanic." Her lips curved ever so slightly. "A mechanic who accomplished what our physicians declared impossible." Lord Talon nodded. "Atara, it was your insistence that we summon him. Now your judgment shall guide what follows." Atara inclined her head gracefully. "Then I shall begin by saying this gratitude is not optional. Tonight we hold a celebration. He will be honored as Talon Ven." Jack blinked. "That's really not necessary. I didn't do it for recognition." "It is necessary," Atara interrupted, her tone brooking no argument. "To refuse would cause greater offense than you can imagine. You will attend. You will accept our gratitude." Jack hesitated, then bowed his head slightly. "Then I'll be honored." Atara's gaze lingered on him a moment longer, and Jack felt the weight of it in his chest, unsettling but not unwelcome. The hours leading to the celebration passed in a blur. Jack was measured for formal attire fitted with garments tailored hastily to his human frame. The deep blue fabric clung to his broad shoulders, silver accents reflecting the colors of House Talon. He received a crash course in Nalarian etiquette, how to bow, how to accept gifts, when to remain silent. Atara herself oversaw his preparation. She moved with poised efficiency, adjusting the collar of his attire, instructing him in the subtleties of gesture and tone. Yet her touches lingered longer than they needed to, her eyes studying him with a fascination she did not bother to conceal. At one point, she paused, standing so close that Jack could smell the faint fragrance clinging to her, a scent like cinnamon blended with something wilder, alien, yet intoxicating. "Why did you help her?" she asked suddenly. "Truly, you owed us nothing. You risked much." Jack hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Because she's a kid. On Earth, we say it takes a village to raise a child. She came to me, and that made her my responsibility too. I couldn't sit back and do nothing." Atara's expression softened, though her eyes grew more intense. "You speak as though her fate were your own." Jack shrugged. "Maybe it is. Sometimes. You just know when someone matters." Her lips parted slightly, as though his words had touched something she had buried deep. Then she turned away, resuming her task with deliberate calm. But the silence between them thrummed with unspoken tension. By moonrise, the grand hall of House Talon pulsed with light and music. Nalarian nobles filled the chamber, their iridescent garments glittering their expressions, ranging from polite curiosity to thinly veiled disdain at the sight of a human in their midst. Jack entered at Atara's side, trying not to fidget under so many eyes. Leary spotted him immediately, waving enthusiastically from where she stood beside Lord Talon. Her visor had been integrated into an ornate headpiece, turning the experimental device into something resembling a deliberate fashion statement. "Jack," she called, her voice ringing clear. Several nobles raised their brows at her informality. Jack smiled despite himself, lifting a hand in acknowledgement. Lord Talon raised his hand and the music silenced. His voice carried through the hall, resonant and commanding. "Tonight we honor an outsider, a human who has returned light to the darkness, hope to despair, and joy to House Talon. By our right of debt and honor, we welcome Jack Harmon as Talon Ven." Gasps rippled through the assembly. Some nobles applauded politely, others whispered furiously. One in particular, a tall male with a sharp jaw and eyes filled with contempt, glared openly. Atara leaned close, her lips brushing Jack's ear. "That is Lord Nevin of House Prayton, our oldest rival. He will not forgive this." Jack nodded slightly, eyes narrowing. He had faced worse glares before on battlefields where glares were followed by bullets. When the formalities ended, the music resumed. Nobles approached in waves, some to offer polite greetings, others to probe him with veiled questions. Jack endured it all, repeating the phrases Atara had drilled into him. "Speak only when addressed directly. Accept all gifts with both hands. Do not drink from your cup until your host has tasted first." Through it all, Atara remained at his side, guiding him with subtle gestures, shielding him from the sharpest barbs of alien etiquette. And when at last they slipped onto a balcony overlooking glowing gardens, the air between them shifted. "You did well," she said, standing close enough that her arm brushed his. "Many expected you to falter." "I had an excellent teacher," Jack replied, his voice lower now, more personal. The moonlight painted her features in soft silver, highlighting the delicate constellations that seemed etched into her skin. Jack found it hard to look away. "There is a directness in humans," Atara said quietly, "a refusal to dance around meaning. It is refreshing." Jack swallowed, pulse quickening. "And dangerous," he murmured. She turned, eyes locking onto his. "Perhaps, but some dangers are worth it." The space between them seemed to shrink, the world narrowing, until there was nothing but her breath, her gaze, the unspoken invitation trembling in the air. Jack leaned closer, his voice husky. "In human custom, this would be the moment I'd kiss you." Atara's lips curved, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Then perhaps tonight we honor human custom as well." Their lips met, tentative at first, then with a certainty that banished hesitation. Her skin was cooler than his, her touch feather light, yet charged with intensity. When they finally parted, both were breathless, eyes wide with the knowledge that something irreversible had begun. "We should return," Atara said softly, though she didn't step back. "Yes," Jack agreed, equally reluctant. But as they finally turned to rejoin the celebration, Jack knew with absolute certainty that this night had changed everything. The celebration swelled around them, music thrumming through the vaulted chamber light, orbs drifting like luminous jellyfish above the heads of the nobles. Jack did his best to navigate the gauntlet of polite conversation, endless ceremonial toasts, and the subtle undercurrents of suspicion that followed him like a shadow. He had been through battlefield interrogations that felt less exhausting. Atara remained close, her presence a lifeline. Leary danced between guests, her new visor integrated into a silver headpiece, so seamless that many nobles mistook it for a deliberate ornament rather than a medical device. She moved with astonishing confidence, weaving between attendants and courtiers with laughter on her lips. Jack couldn't remember the last time he had seen her so alive. But unease gnawed at him. The contemptuous glare of Lord Nevin of House Prayton had not gone unnoticed. More than once, Jack caught the man whispering to his entourage, his eyes never far from either Jack or the child he had helped. As the evening wore on, Jack slipped onto a balcony for air. The gardens below shimmered with bioluminescent flora, casting shifting hues across the night. Atara joined him, her gown whispering against the stone. "You've held yourself admirably," she murmured. Standing so close, her arm brushed his. "Many expected you to falter." Jack chuckled softly. "I almost did 3 times. Thank you for saving me from drinking the wrong cup." Atara smiled, her silver-flecked eyes catching the moonlight. "You learn quickly. That too is a human strength." They were leaning toward each other when a discreet cough broke the moment. Von the steward stood at the doorway. His usually stoic face was grave. "Forgive the intrusion, my lady. There is an urgent matter requiring your presence, and that of Talon Ven." Atara's smile faded. "What is it, Von Kahonyenon?" "It is the young mistress," he said. His voice wavered slightly, something Jack had never heard before. "She is missing, and her visor is gone." Jack's blood ran cold. The celebration dissolved into chaos within minutes. Guards fanned through the estate corridors, echoing with shouted orders. Nobles whispered furiously, their suspicion as sharp as daggers. Lord Talon summoned Jack and Atara to the security chamber, where a wall of holographic displays flickered with feeds from across the estate. His face was carved from stone eyes burning with controlled fury. "Someone breached our defenses," the patriarch said without preamble. Sensors detected a transport signature consistent with Prayton technology in the East Garden less than 15 minutes ago. Atara hissed, fists clenched. Nevin, that viper, he would dare. Jack's stomach tightened. Why take her? If they wanted the visor, they could have tried to steal it from me. Before Talon could answer, the central display flickered. The sneering face of Lord Nevin appeared illuminated by cold light. "Ah," Talon, Nevin said smoothly. "I trust your celebration continues without incident." "Return my granddaughter," Lord Talon thundered, his voice shaking the chamber. "Or face consequences you cannot imagine." Nevin's smile widened. "I'm afraid I don't know what you mean." However, his eyes shifted, glittering with malice. "I am curious about the human's remarkable invention. Such technology could fetch an extraordinary price in the right hands. Perhaps if he were to visit me, with schematics, of course, the child might be returned unharmed." Atara's voice cut like a blade. "If you harm her, Nevin." "The child is safe," Nevin interrupted, savoring each word. "For now. But if you wish her to remain so, bring the human to the old boundary marker within the hour. Alone. Otherwise?" His smile sharpened. "Accidents happen." The transmission ended. Silence settled over the chamber. The air smelled of ozone and tension. "I'll go," Jack said immediately. Atara whirled toward him, eyes blazing. "It's a trap. He will not release her no matter what you give him." Jack nodded grimly. "I know. But if I don't go, she's already lost. And if I do, maybe I can buy us a chance." Lord Talon studied him with unreadable eyes. Then he inclined his head. "Perhaps it is time we see what humans are truly capable of. Von escort him to his workshop. Provide whatever he requires." Atara gripped Jack's arm fiercely as the guards prepared to lead him away. "Return to me," she whispered. What we began tonight, I will not see it end here. Jack cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. Count on it. No alien kidnapper is going to stop me from finding out where this leads. Their kiss was brief, but charged a promise and a vow. Then Jack turned and strode away. Back in his workshop, Jack moved with focused intensity. The Talon guards watched in wary silence as he tore through components, soldering, splicing wiring, with hands steadier than his racing heart. The fine clothes of the celebration lay discarded in a heap. He had returned to his gray mechanic's uniform, the one that felt like a second skin. He built 3 devices. The first, a modified scanner with a hidden EMP trigger capable of disabling any powered device within a tight radius. Crude, yes, but Prayton Tech relied heavily on shielding designed for precision disruptors, not brute force pulses. The second, a small metallic sphere innocuous in appearance. Inside was a compressed smoke emitter designed to flood an area with dense vapor. Prayton soldiers relied heavily on visual sensors. Jack's human-designed modifications would allow him to see heat signatures through the fog. The third, an ordinary repair tool, except that he had re-engineered its power output to deliver stunning bursts of energy at close range. A wrench turned into a weapon. When he finished, sweat clung to his skin. He tested each device quickly, then tucked them into various pockets. All right, he said. Let's do this. Vaughn frowned. The lady commanded I not leave your side. Jack smiled grimly. Tell her I'm following the plan. She'll understand. The boundary marker stood in a moonlit clearing at the edge of the forest, an ancient stone pillar, etched with the crests of both houses Talon and Prayton. It had once marked peace. Tonight it was a battlefield. Jack approached alone, every sense heightened. His heart thudded like war drums, but his stride was steady. Nevin emerged from the shadows, flanked by armored guards. A third held Leary, her visor gone, her expression pale but defiant. She spotted Jack immediately. Jack, she cried, I knew you'd come. Silence, Nevin snapped, jerking her arm. He turned his sneer toward Jack. How refreshingly obedient human. Do you have the specifications? Jack held up a small data crystal. Everything you need to know. Let her go. Nevin gestured and a guard stepped forward to take it. Jack deliberately fumbled, letting the crystal slip to the ground. Oops. Sorry. He crouched, retrieving it slowly. As he rose, his thumb pressed a hidden switch on the scanner in his other pocket. The effect was immediate. Every powered device in a 10-meter radius flickered and died. Shields collapsed. Weapons powered down. Armor lights winked out. What is this? Nevin barked, fury twisting his face. EMP pulse, Jack said calmly. Crude but effective. The guards staggered, momentarily disoriented. Jack tossed the metallic sphere at the one holding Leary. It burst open with a hiss, flooding the clearing with thick smoke. Visibility dropped to nothing, but through his visor-modified tool, Jack saw their heat signatures clear as day. He charged forward. His fist connected with the vulnerable joint of the guard's armor, sending the alien sprawling. Jack scooped Leary into his arms, her small hands clutching desperately at his neck. He slipped the visor from his shielded pocket and snapped it back over her eyes. Hold on tight, kiddo. Got it, she whispered, clinging to him. Stop him! Nevin roared, but his guards were still fumbling with their dead systems, choking in the smoke. Jack sprinted toward the tree line, his lungs burning. His human physiology, honed on a higher gravity world, gave him the edge. Longer strides, greater endurance. Behind him, Nevin shouted curses, his voice cracking with rage. But Jack wasn't finished. As he reached the trees, he triggered the final device, a small transmitter hidden in his belt. It sent a coded pulse skyward. Moments later, the hum of a Talon transport filled the night, descending into the clearing with blinding lights. The side door slid open. Atara stood inside, no longer clad in shimmering silk, but in practical gear, her hair tied back, her eyes blazing with determination. She reached out a hand. Hurry. Jack thrust Leary into her arms, then turned back. Nevin and his guards had emerged from the smoke, their systems sputtering back to life. Nevin himself lunged forward, drawing a concealed blade. This ends now, human, he snarled. Jack sidestepped, catching Nevin's wrist. With a twist honed in military combat, he wrenched the weapon free and sent the Lord crashing to the ground. He pinned him with brutal efficiency, breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. That Jack said evenly was a mistake. The transport's ramp thudded behind him. Lord Talon himself descended, flanked by elite guards whose armor gleamed even in the smoke. His voice was thunder. Nevin of House Prayton, your actions constitute a violation of the Treaty of Houses, kidnapping a noble child, tampering with sacred accords. Your house is finished. A small drone buzzed overhead, projecting images of the entire confrontation. Proof undeniable. Nevin's face twisted in despair. You can't. I already have, Talon said coldly. The Prayton guards dropped their weapons as Talon's soldiers surged forward, binding them with glowing restraints. Nevin struggled, but his voice was drowned beneath the weight of justice. Minutes later, the transport lifted off the forest, shrinking below. Leary sat nestled against Atara, her visor glowing softly as she turned to Jack. You saved me, she whispered. Her voice trembled, but her smile was radiant, just like the stories humans tell. Jack ruffled her hair gently, his own heart still pounding. That's what friends do, kiddo. Lord Talon approached, his expression grave but tinged with respect. Once again, House Talon finds itself in your debt, Jack Harmon. Your methods were unorthodox, but undeniably effective. Jack shrugged, exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. Humans survive by improvising. Sometimes the simplest trick is the one your enemy least expects. Atara's hand found his fingers intertwining. Her voice was soft but fierce. And sometimes, Jack Harmon, it takes a human heart to remind us what really matters. Jack met her gaze, and in that moment, despite the chaos, the danger, and the uncertain future, he knew he would never walk away. 3 months later, the clang and hum of Jack's workshop sounded very different from the lonely garage he had once called home. The air still smelled faintly of hot metal and ionized circuits, but the space itself was transformed. Where once there had been mismatched crates and salvage piles, now stood polished benches lined with state-of-the-art tools. Holographic schematics floated above workstations, and shelves of exotic components gleamed beneath soft lighting. It was 3 times the size of his old shop, equipped with technology he could only have dreamed of. A gift, no, an investment from House Talon. But for Jack, the true treasure was not the tools, it was the people who now filled the space. Jack, come see. Leary's voice rang with excitement. She stood at the far bench, visor glowing softly, her small hands busy with a cluster of wires and circuits. The once shy girl now carried herself with confidence, her laughter filling the workshop as she twisted a dial and activated a tiny hologram projector. A spinning image of a Nilarian bird burst to life, wings beating in perfect rhythm. Jack leaned against the bench, a proud grin tugging at his lips. Not bad, assistant. Give it a year and you'll be running circles around me. She giggled, her ears twitching with delight. You always say that. And I'll keep saying it, Jack replied, ruffling her lavender hair. Because it's true. Von the Everstern steward stood nearby with arms folded, but even his stoic expression softened as he watched the child thrive. She has learned much, he admitted grudgingly. Your methods, unorthodox as always, yet undeniably effective. Jack smirked. Story of my life. Atara entered then, her presence as commanding as ever, though no longer draped in mourning robes. Instead, she wore garments of deep violet, accented with silver, her long hair braided with delicate ornaments that shimmered in the light. Her gaze fell first on Larry, softening with maternal pride before shifting to Jack. You spoil her, Atara teased, though there was no reproach in her tone. Jack raised a brow. Teaching a kid to build holograms isn't spoiling. It's preparing her to take over the galaxy. Atara's lips curved, her silver-flecked eyes lingering on him. And what of you, Jack Harmon? Have you considered what place you now hold here? Jack glanced around the workshop, then back at her. Still figuring that out. I fix things. That's who I am. Doesn't matter if it's a busted communicator or a broken treaty. Her smile deepened, though her gaze grew more intense. You are more than that. My father-in-law sees it. So do I. The warmth in her eyes made his chest tighten. Their relationship had scandalized many in Nilarian society. At first, whispers of impropriety, outrage at the idea of a human entangled with a noble widow. But time and Jack's role in exposing House Prayton's treachery had shifted the tide. Opposition gave way to curiosity, then grudging acceptance. The announcement of their formal union scheduled for the coming month had been met with more intrigue than outrage. For the first time in generations, a human would stand beside a Nilarian noble, not as a servant or outsider, but as an equal partner. Atara crossed the room, her violet gown trailing softly behind her. She slipped her arms around Jack's waist, resting her head against his back. He closed his eyes, savoring the cool touch of her skin, the steady rhythm of her breath. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice a melodic whisper. Jack exhaled slowly. How a simple repair job turned into all this. Her fingers tightened around him. "Do you regret it?" He turned in her arms, cupping her face with rough hands. Not for a second. She kissed him then, slow, lingering, filled with the kind of certainty that left no room for doubt. The kind of kiss that told him he had found a home. Later that night, they lay together in the quiet of her chambers. The silken sheets felt alien against Jack's scarred skin, but the woman nestled against him made the strangeness fade into something he could only describe as belonging. Atara's head rested on his chest, her hair spilling like liquid midnight across his skin. "You think too loudly," she murmured, amusement in her voice. Jack chuckled softly. "Just wondering what else is waiting for us out there. What trouble we'll find next." She lifted her head, eyes gleaming in the moonlight that spilled through the crystal windows. "With a human's ingenuity and a Nilarian's wisdom," she said, "the possibilities are endless." Jack smiled, pulling her close again. For once, he didn't argue. In the months that followed, Jack's presence reshaped more than just House Talon's fortunes. Nobles who had once sneered now came to him with requests, repairs, modifications, even negotiations where his blunt honesty cut through layers of alien politics. Yet Jack never forgot what mattered most. He spent mornings in the workshop with Leary, guiding her curious hands as she dismantled devices and rebuilt them with growing skill. Afternoons often found him in Atara's company, their partnership balancing politics and personal discovery alike. And at night, when the estate grew quiet, Jack would step onto the balcony and look out at the alien sky. The stars burned differently here, strange constellations painted across the velvet dark. But beneath their light, he felt the same awe he had as a boy staring up from Earth. Humanity had always been outnumbered in the galaxy, outgunned, out-teched. Yet here he stood, an ordinary mechanic who had changed the fate of one child, one family, one noble house. Not by superior weapons, not by advanced science, but by stubbornness, compassion, and the refusal to accept that something impossible should remain so. That was the true advantage of being human. One evening, as the estate buzzed with preparations for the union ceremony, Jack found himself back in the workshop. Leary was perched on her stool now brought from the old garage and polished until it gleamed. She worked intently on the visor, making adjustments with tools nearly too large for her small hands. "Careful," Akaka warned, watching as sparks jumped. She grinned, utterly unbothered. "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Jack laughed, shaking his head. "That's what I'm afraid of. You'll outpace me by the time you're 10. Maybe sooner," she shot back cheekily. Atara entered, then catching the exchange with a soft smile. "She has an excellent teacher," she said, moving to Jack's side. Jack slipped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. Together, they watched Leary tinker, her laughter filling the workshop. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt whole. As night fell and the household grew still, Jack and Atara lay together once more, the cool of her skin pressed against his warmth. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of her breath. "Do you ever wonder," he asked quietly, "what would have happened if she'd never walked into my shop that day?" Atara tilted her head, silver-flecked eyes luminous in the dim light. "Then the galaxy would be poorer for it." Jack smiled faintly, brushing a strand of violet hair from her face. "Sometimes being human feels like a disadvantage out here. But then, I remember nights like this, and I wouldn't trade it for all the advanced tech in the galaxy." She kissed him gently, her voice a whisper against his lips. "Nor would I." And as Jack drifted towards sleep, his arms wrapped around her, the knowledge that Leary was safe and thriving settled in his heart like a flame that would never die. Because in a universe of ancient civilizations and powerful species, humanity's true strength was not in its machines or armies. It was in its ability to care, to imagine, to see problems differently, and to love fiercely enough to change everything.